welcome everyone to the Chicago Area Homeopathy Study Group. This is the first class of hopefully many. I'm Dr. Richard Ezgur, and you can all get in touch with me. I'd prefer if you were to send me an email at DRE for Dr. E at progressivechiropractic.com, which is the email address you've been receiving emails from me from. So just a little bit about myself before we get started. I got into chiropractic initially, having suffered from a lot of back pain in high school, and I was a competitive tennis player and had a lot of back pain, and was given probably the worst advice possible at the time, which was consistent with the conventional medical model, which was bed rest, total bed rest, not to get up at all for 2 weeks. So by the time you take a 16-year-old athlete and tell them to rest in bed for 2 weeks and then try to return to sport, it's not going to happen. Now you're in pain, you still have the same problem, and you're deconditioned. Eventually I found chiropractic to be a very helpful thing for me, and that's kind of what spurred my interest in natural health, doing that. So I graduated from the National College of Chiropractic in 1996 and started practicing. It went on to do a 3-year postgraduate degree in sports and spinal rehabilitation. So we incorporate a lot of physical therapy, sports and spinal medicine into the practice, as well as acupuncture and chiropractic and massage and nutritional consultation, vitamins, minerals, herbs, those kinds of things, to really try to offer a comprehensive type of care for patients, because a lot of patients have different needs, and some need a lot more comprehensive care than just a chiropractic adjustment or just a set of exercises. After I was dabbling in homeopathy, I learned a little bit about it in chiropractic school and used some basic remedies without not in any great depth. And I went along practicing and learned a lot and helped a lot of people. But what I found is, over the years, that there were an awful lot of people who had chronic recurring problems that chiropractic could help manage and help to some degree, but not necessarily cure. And it became an area of frustration for me, because being able to help someone if they were coming to see me on all levels. And what I found was that people who have chronic recurring low back pain, or chronic recurring headaches, or chronic recurring neck pain, almost always tend to have problems, health problems in other areas. They tend to have usually more than 1 or 2 of the following symptoms: low energy, anxiety, depression, headaches, allergies, asthma, panic attacks, skin disorders, GI problems, problems with sleep, problems with mood. And so with these group of people, these people tend to get lumped into categories, labeled chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, candidiasis, adrenal insufficiency, thyroid insufficiency, whatever is kind of the in vogue theory at the time, or it's all in your head, it's psychosomatic. And after a while of dealing with patients like these, sometimes I actually felt like, well, actually maybe it is. Maybe these people don't want to get better. Maybe there's something. There's this block. And it wasn't until later that I discovered homeopathy in greater depth that I realized that it's not so much that it's in one's head or not in one's head. It's in one's body. It's a global. These problems are representative or indicative of global health disturbances, and all of these symptoms are just manifestations of one single imbalance that's stemming. It's a generalized systemic kind of imbalance. So the body is not really perfectly tuned. It's not perfectly healthy, and so it becomes sensitive or susceptible to many different stimuli in the environment, or within our own bodies even. And so the individual becomes, to some degree, more sensitive, more susceptible to some of these problems. So for example, a disc bulge. Many people, about a third of the population, it's estimated, are walking around with no back pain whatsoever and have disc bulges. But then there's some for whom it causes a lot of problems. We all, every day, walk outside and inhale in the summer, spring pollen. Some of us have allergies to it, some of us don't. We're all exposed to a lot of toxic foods. Some of us are sensitive to it, some of us aren't. Some people, when they're under stress, will develop headaches. Some people will get an ulcer. But it's this underlying sensitivity that seems to be a problem, more so for some people than others. And people with chronic diseases tend to be more sensitive. They tend to overreact to a smaller stress will cause much more anxiety. A smaller exposure to pollen will cause an allergic response. A small disc bulge may cause excruciating pain. So this is what I sort of recognize as a group of patients, and these are the group of patients that really respond well to homeopathy with chronic diseases. And that's what I found to be the case. I actually myself had pretty severe and frequent headaches until I finally sought the care of a classically trained pure homeopath. And when I saw what the results were for myself, I again delved once more into another whole course of education. And after studying with Dr. Andre Sain of the Canadian Academy of Homeopathy, extensively with coursework there, seminars, visits to Montreal on a regular basis, I became much more focused on practicing pure classical homeopathy. And I've seen in my practice, just as many other homeopaths do, that all of these patients that had all these chronic recurring problems that I would see in my practice, chronic back pain, neck pain, headaches, these kinds of things, would not only get better from those things that they were coming in to see me with, but that I was also able to help them overcome anxiety, depression, sleep and mood disorders, allergies, eczema, all these different things, just with one treatment. So that's what I've become very excited about, very passionate about, and have continued to really focus my efforts in continuing to learn and now teach more about homeopathy. So as we go along, I would encourage you to send me by email cases. We're gonna learn how to do this, but you can send me your own cases with what you've observed, what remedies you've prescribed, and what results you've had, and we can then share those with the class. The other thing I'd like to mention is there's a national organization called the National Center for Homeopathy. And if you can just pause for a second. Okay, so as I was saying, a really good resource for you guys is the National Center of Homeopathy. That's under the outline section, under Roman numeral 1. D is, I'm encouraging you guys to join the NCH. The web address is homeopathic.org. And it's a great organization. You'll get, if you join, you'll get a newsletter, actually sort of a monthly magazine that comes out with good information about how to use homeopathy for yourself and your family, as well as supporting homeopathy research. So it's a really good, it's the main national homeopathic organization in existence today. So the purpose of this course is to give you, first of all, information about, and this is what we're going to cover in the first probably 2 or maybe even 3 sessions, the introduction to homeopathy, how it works, the history of it, the philosophy behind it, what it is, how it works, a good understanding of that. Then we'll move into the treatment of patients with certain conditions. We'll cover things like first aid, colds and flus, excuse me, upset tummy aches, things like that, allergies, rashes, different kinds of things like that. Now, this is not designed to be an all-encompassing actual like trained or certification course in homeopathy. This is just to give you guys a good sense of how to use homeopathy for not very serious conditions around the house, and more of an understanding so that you will have the ability to understand when you should be treating it on your own or when you should be calling a homeopath or another qualified healthcare provider to be able to treat these things. So, which brings me to the next point in the outline, differentiating an acute from a chronic disease. So you'll be learning really to treat acute diseases only. any kind of chronic disease should always be left to a well-trained homeopath or other healthcare provider. So by acute, we mean something that has just developed recently that's likely to, and actually in this case, probably likely to resolve on its own, but in the meantime there's still symptoms and they're often unpleasant. And so by treating a person in an acute disease, we can help the acute disease pass more quickly, without side effects, without toxicity from medications, encourage the body to do it naturally on its own, and hopefully prevent other complications from that disease. For example, treating a common cold. If you treat a patient with a common cold effectively, there's less chances that that cold will then turn into a more serious bacterial infection. Okay. So a chronic disease is something that's been around for a longer period of time, that is not necessarily going away on its own by definition. It's persisting, and usually a chronic disease is more indicative of a long-lasting underlying, like I said before, underlying health disturbance. That's, you know, the evidence of a chronic health imbalance are these chronic symptoms that people have and continue to have. So that's a much more complicated type of situation to treat. It requires what I do in a typical initial visit with a patient, which is an initial 2 to 3 hour interview, and then deciding which remedy is indicated. And it's a much more complicated process. But for straightforward kinds of first aid type things, colds and flus, things like that, you'll be able to treat with varying degrees of success these problems. And then if you're not successful, or it's not going well, then you can always go to the next step, which is to call a professional homeopath or other healthcare provider. And there's a handout that you have. There's actually two that I want to call your attention to. One is from Castro's book on prescribing. And it's at chapter 5, and it says prescribing. And this is basically talks about when to prescribe, sort of when not to prescribe, talks about diseases you can treat, and diseases you should probably not attempt to treat. And actually, those are the two handouts that are sort of stapled together as one. So that's I would read that section of Miranda Castro's book, and you will understand that a little more clearly. Actually, could I please, Janice, could you run those books over to me just so I can mention them also for the video for people watching on their computers? So the two texts I'm recommending for this course is the Complete Homeopathy Handbook by Miranda Castro. It's a great reference tool and guide to homeopathy, as well as Stephen Cummings and Dana Ullman's book, Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicines. So these two texts I'm going to refer to in this outline, and they're very useful. They go through everything we're talking about today. The background of homeopathy, and then they get into an explanation of a lot of different remedies, as well as how to take a case, how to decide which remedy to prescribe in what kind of instance. So, you know, there are general guidelines in terms of when to self-treat and when to get help from a doctor. I think, generally speaking, common sense is one good guide. If you feel overly nervous or hesitant to do it, it's probably a good idea that your intuition is telling you this might not be a good idea. More specifically, in instances of high fever, in instances where you don't really know what it is, it doesn't look like something you've seen before, it looks pretty serious, there's a severe amount of pain, a severe amount of symptoms, those are best left to a qualified healthcare provider. If it's something that you know to be something that you would typically take an over-the-counter medication for, and then if symptoms persist or worsen, call your doctor. It's the same kind of recommendation. So anything you might be inclined to use in an over-the-counter way, homeopathic remedies are actually over-the-counter, FDA-approved medications. So you can use those in those instances with all of the same guidelines that we've all grown up with. If symptoms persist or worsen or get more serious, then you call your doctor. Okay. Any questions on anything so far? So the next topic is a long one. It's Hahnemann and the law of similars and other philosophical considerations. So Samuel Hahnemann was a physician in the late 1700s who was practicing in Germany.
Where are you?
So I'm back in the outline under Roman numeral 2. Okay. And by the way, anyone watching on video, if you don't have these handouts and you'd like to follow along, you can send me an email, dre@progressivechiropractic.com, and I can email you most of these. He was a medical doctor who was disillusioned with medicine as it was being practiced at the time. So he took a little break and was doing a lot of different things. But one of the things he was doing was translating other medical texts. And he came across some writings in which he found that Peruvian bark, or the Latin is cinchona, homeopaths call it China, the Peruvian bark was used to treat malaria. And he was looking at actually some writings of Hippocrates, who was actually the first person to discuss the law of similars, which is the concept that homeopathy is based on. So it wasn't really Hahnemann who came up with it. It was actually dates all the way back to Hippocrates, talking about the law of similars, which we'll address in a minute. And Hahnemann saw that and thought, well, he did a little experiment on himself, and he ingested some of the Peruvian bark and started to develop symptoms of malaria, which is the disease that Peruvian bark was used to treat. So he theorized and came up with the actual law of similars as we know it today, which is the next point down in your handout there. In Latin, similia similibus curantur. Let likes be cured with likes. So the law of similars states that, and there's different precise translation of it, but the one that I like is the same substance that can cause disease in a healthy person can also help to promote healing to those who are suffering from the same or similar disease. So I don't say that the substance can cure the disease. I say that the substance can also help to promote healing of those who are suffering from that disease. And that is the law of similars, and that is the overriding principle of homeopathy. It explains it very well, and that we use similars to treat a similar, and that's the word homeopathy, homeo meaning like, and pathos meaning suffering. So we're using a similar substance to treat a similar disease. In the case of malaria, we're using cinchona or China, which is the Peruvian bark that would cause symptoms of malaria if you ingested it in its pure or unadulterated state. But if you turn it into a homeopathic remedy by diluting it and succussing it, which we'll talk about, it will actually promote healing of someone who's suffering from malaria. So this concept has actually been around prior to Hahnemann, dating back all the way to Hippocrates, and it's actually used to some degree in conventional medicine as we know it today, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But so I want to compare and contrast allopathy versus homeopathy. So allopathy meaning a different suffering versus homeopathy meaning similar suffering. So in allopathy is mostly practiced by conventional, quote-unquote, Western medicine. So in allopathy, we're treating a disease with its opposite. If you have inflammation, we give you an anti-inflammatory. If you're depressed because your serotonin levels are too low, we'll just give you some serotonin. If